It is time to head to the United States and check out all the latest news. It's been a busy week. Of course, Professor of Political Science Peter Matthews joins us. Good morning, Peter. And Donald Trump is back on Instagram.
Yes, he is, after being off for a couple of years. In fact, he was kicked off of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and several other social media because of the potential involvement that he had with the insurrection. And he's been brought back on again because he has a huge audience. I think these social media people want to have the audience. It sells a lot of advertising, but it's also very dangerous. Facebook can be used to transfer information over to Truth Social and vice versa, because he's on Truth Social. And so you can still reach millions of his followers, and there has to be safety precautions kept in place for sure. We're not sure if these social media can actually do it the right way to keep the Americans safe while still allowing freedom of expression.
Now, the whole battle between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis is heating up. What do you make of it?
It's pretty remarkable and interesting to watch because they are two people with similar platforms, but their personalities are very different. With Trump's charisma in his own way to have so many millions of followers, DeSantis is coming up trying to portray himself as someone who's a Trump without the baggage of all the emotional ups and downs. And DeSantis is actually falling behind a little bit in the polls. Trump has gone ahead quite a bit, actually, because of what happened with his indictment. When he was indicted, it had a reaction the opposite way, and many of his followers came up and started supporting him even more. On the other hand, when it comes to the race between the Republican versus Biden, DeSantis does better. He wins at least 48% of the vote to 44% for Biden. That's according to the Wall Street Journal poll, by the way, recently taken. But Trump loses to Biden by 4%, 48 to 44, something almost the same numbers, but a loss for DeSantis, a win for DeSantis in the general election against Biden, and a loss for Trump in the general election. In the primaries, Trump is ahead, even with the multi-candidate race going on.
There are all sorts of different polls. There was one poll that I saw where Donald Trump was slightly ahead of Joe Biden.
I saw that one too, and that was about a week ago. This is the most recent poll, and it changes over a few days, and it does go back and forth as well. So we got to keep a close eye on all of this, and we don't know how it's going to turn out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It does look like Joe Biden will run again.
It certainly does. He's made a commitment. I think today there'll be an announcement, but the final formal announcement will come next week. And he's set on going all the way through and winning the election again. He's going to try to do that. And we will see if he has the ability to do that, given the condition of the economy. His policies were quite good in terms of investing in the U.S. infrastructure and growing the environmental safeguards and climate change legislation and creating jobs. And the unemployment rate is fairly low right now. Inflation has come down from 9%, which is very high, to about 6.2%. And yet Biden has a negative approval rating versus in terms of his positive approval versus negative. It's more like 43% to 54 negative. And we need to see how that's going to affect him, because that's going to be tough for a candidate. I think he might be able to overcome it in the end. And if he runs against President Trump or former President Trump, he may have a better shot.
Do you think it's a little bit of a sugar hit for Donald Trump at the moment because of what happened in New York?
Absolutely. That had an impact because of what happened. His indictment, his people rallied to him and came out in the polling and say they're definitely going to vote for him. They probably brought some other people along with them that didn't know much about him. And that gave him a boost to a few percent in the primaries. Again, it's the primary election we're talking about first. And DeSantis or anyone else has to overcome Trump in the primaries. I still think it's going to be tough unless there are a lot of other things that occur, which could be a drastic change. We don't know how these court cases are going to come out. If he's indicted again on another charge and then he has to stand another trial besides the one that's coming up in December, there's other things going on which could actually bring him down further, but we don't know yet. At this point, he's a front runner.
Peter, it continues to be a country divided on so many issues. One of those at the top of the list is abortion.
Yes, it's a hugely divisive issue, although the majority of Americans, at least 65 to 70%, support keeping abortion legal in some manner or the other for women to choose in their own. And yet we have an issue today, which was an issue of the abortion pill, mifepristone, which was a pill that was used for 20 years now by American women. The majority of women's abortions were done using those pills instead of having to have a surgical abortion. It keeps them safer. And yet the lower court in Texas struck it down and said the FDA assessment of that pill was wrong, that the FDA has to go back after 20 years of usage, showing that it was less than 1% problematic. Yet the judge struck it down, and this went to the Supreme Court to decide now. They sent it back to the 5th District Court to have them bring it back up to the Supreme Court to make a final decision. It'll take about at least a year to decide that. But the country is heavily divided on that issue. And it's also going to divide the Republican Party to some extent, even more so.
What about gun laws? We see school children writing letters and sending things to Washington, D.C. We've seen 160. It is almost impossible to fathom 160 mass shootings across the United States already this year.
It is horrendous, Tim, what's been going on. And this, of course, the gun violence runs into thousands a year if you include the handguns. But the mass shootings are very dramatic. It's shaking up a lot of people. And if I look at what Australia did with the Port Arthur massacre, right after the massacre in Port Arthur, Australia did a tremendously progressive and very positive development with Prime Minister John Howard, who came up with the states for reform, which included a 28-day waiting period, strict gun licensing and registration, banning of assault weapons and some automatic weapons. And that was really tremendous. It had a big plummeting of gun violence when Australia did that many years ago. We need to learn from you guys about that and try to do something about it over here.
Oh, absolutely. But is there any chance? We saw Donald Trump addressing the NRA conference the other day. We saw Pence doing the same thing.
It just seems to me like so many members of Congress, particularly the Republican Party, are so beholden to the NRA and the national gun manufacturers who pump the NRA full of money, which then goes into political action committees for these candidates. And the candidates are scared to death of not getting the money to run again for the next election. And this is what I call dollar democracy on steroids. That means money chasing politics and special interests like the gun lobby controlling the country, and many legislators who then do not vote for the kind of gun safety measures that we absolutely need, Tim. Tim, the first right that's mentioned in our Declaration of Independence is the right to life. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't have any of those as long as you have these kind of guns chasing people around, these little kids in terror in schools. They can't even focus on their studies. This has to be done, and politicians have to really do the right thing from now on.
Finally, some of the laws that were written into place in and around, right to bear arms were when we were walking around the streets with muskets.
Unbelievable. They have open carry laws, concealed weapons laws there in so many states, and even open carry. And it's just unbelievable that we're going back to the old Wild West. That has to be turned around because it just isn't working. It's causing such mayhem and havoc and destabilizing our society. I think it's a national security issue. Until our politicians take this seriously and the people actually rise up peacefully and demand the change, it just won't happen. We need to move forward on that, Mike.
Oh, absolutely, Peter. Let's hope something can possibly be done. Let's talk again next week.
You bet. Thank you, Tim.